This is a K100 from 1961, 1962 in classic brown burst. Possibly known as one of the ugliest guitars ever made. You know, it would have been better if they like kept this over here, or you know, if you look at it this way, it's almost a telly shape, except they got the nub a little bit too nubby. You know, if it would have been just a little, it would have been better. And in a lot of ways, this is very much like a telly. It's just a plank, right? It's just square cut edge. It's 1.5 inches. It's not as thick as a telly, but solid poplar neck, solid rosewood fretboard. It would make a great telly. And it's also a longer scale. I can't remember. It's like 25 3/4. Yeah, it's like 24 and almost 7/8. So it's almost like a 26-inch scale, which would have made a great telly because it'd be super twangy. But you know, that's neither here nor there. It is what it is. And originally, it only had this one pickup. So this is the original pick guard with the original pancake pickup. And that's, first of all, the position of that nobody wants, and it's not enough to have one pickup on a guitar. Everybody knows that. You got to have all these switches and knobs and things to twiddle with. So I put two P90s on there with a 5-way switch. So we have the basic Strat setup where here's this pickup, which is a P90 voiced for the neck position. It's nice and creamy. Then you have these two in parallel and in phase. So you get a little bit of the quack there. The quack comes from the distance between these two, right? If this was farther, if it was these two, it wouldn't quack. It's just because of the relationship to how close they are. That's the only way you get a quack. So that works out. Middle position is just this, and this is what this guitar would have sounded like, is what it does sound like in its original configuration. Very clean sound. A lot of people love these pancakes. It's got like 5.5K output, which is not bad. Originally, the way they built it, it's riveted into the pick guard, so there's no way to lift it up or not, and it's down kind of low. So that means I've had to push the other pickups down a little bit to get them all equal. Otherwise, there'd be giant jumps in volume, and we don't want that. It's just turn your amp up, okay? Just turn your amp up. You'll be satisfied. And then this position are these two pickups, but they're out of phase. So you get that nasally funky funk sound. And then of course we have this one alone, which has a little bit more volume because it's a little bit hotter and it's very crunchy. And if you crank, like you said, turn your amp up, you'd be satisfied. So you have a 5-way Strat setup with one out of phase situation, because there's really no point in having two in phase quack sounds because they sound so similar. Right? That's my theory. And it's not easy to get everything to hum cancel and stay in phase with the wrap of the wire and the magnet orientation and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I could have done it, but I thought, no, I don't want to do it that way. I want to have this position available. So then we have two new sets of pots, and the original bridges on these were funky wooden bridges, and they would have been covered with a clamshell. The beauty of, another one of the beauties of these Ks, as opposed to, say, the Bobcats, is the neck it matches perfectly with modern neck setups. 1/11/16 inch nut, and it will match to a tune-o-matic perfectly with the right string spread. Whereas like a Bobcat, the harmonies crazy little guitars, they're crazy little guitars, and the funky, you can't do it. You know, they're too narrow, and they're a little bit weird in that sense. Not bad, but just weird. So this is going to feel more like a regular guitar, just a slightly longer scale. And under the clamshell, you would have had this original stop piece, which I had to raise up a little bit in order to not, you know, rub on the Tune-o-matic. But it's fully adjustable. It's got really low action. Lots of nice sounds. Very standard sort of D. It's almost like a soft V on this thing. And new frets. They're like a vintage style. They're pretty narrow, little tiny frets. Not tiny, but they're small frets. They're not jumbos. And then I have a new set of vintage style tuners on a strip that work perfectly. Unfortunately, the foil thing up here that got broken off. This tells you, this and the headstock tell you the year, because they made these in the 60s, the early 60s, and then they kind of whiffed on it for a while, and then they brought them back in the later 60s. But the later 60s have the bushwhacker head. The earliest ones have the 3x3 head. So it's a nice one. I mean, they get a bad rap because they're kind of hideous looking. And it's important to know that later, when they brought them back, they didn't paint them brown. They painted them nice colors, and they're, you know, and then they're not so bad. But the nub, it's the problem with this is the nub. So if you want a vintage guitar that's set up perfectly, has a lot of nice sounds, including some hand-wound P90s that'll crush anything out there, this is it. It's a K100.